The private jet sat silent on the runway like a monument to failure. Inside the massive glass headquarters of Blackstone Aerospace, CEO Marcus Hale stood in front of a wall of screens, watching another red alert flash across the system. Another test flight had failed. Another engine shut down. Another multi-million-dollar disaster. Engineers had spent 3 years and nearly $4 billion trying to fix the company's revolutionary jet engine, the ETH turbine, a machine that was supposed to change aviation forever. Instead, it had become Marcus's nightmare. Every expert in the world had touched it. Top scientists from Germany, elite engineers from Japan, retired military specialists, NASA consultants. They all promised answers. They all left with invoices. And still, the engine failed every single time. Now investors were pulling out. Share prices were collapsing. Employees whispered about layoffs. News headlines called him the billionaire who burned billions. Marcus stared at the silent engine inside Hangar 7 and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Helpless. And that was the morning a homeless woman walked through the gates. But before we continue, if you believe kindness matters more than status, and second chances can change lives, take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that miracles sometimes arrive wearing torn clothes. Her name was Evelyn Carter, though no one there cared enough to ask. Security almost removed her before she reached the hangar. Her clothes were worn and stained by city dust. Her shoes were old and split at the edges. Her hair, streaked with gray, was tied loosely behind her neck. She carried a small canvas bag and walked with the quiet confidence of someone who had already survived worse than humiliation. Most people assumed she was there asking for food. So, some mechanics laughed when they saw her standing near the engine platform. One pointed and smirked. Another muttered that the company had finally hired street consultants. Marcus had just arrived in the hangar when he noticed the commotion. He was exhausted, wearing the same suit jacket from yesterday, tie loosened, eyes hollow from sleepless nights. He looked toward the crowd and saw the woman standing there, staring at the exposed turbine like she recognized it. Not glanced at it. Recognized it. Recognized. There was something unsettling about the way she looked at the machine, not with curiosity, but with memory. Before security could escort her out, she spoke. She said the problem wasn't in the combustion chamber. Everyone went quiet. One senior engineer laughed immediately. That had been the company's main theory for nearly a year. Millions had been spent redesigning that exact section. The woman shook her head and stepped closer. She said the vibration imbalance was being misread. The issue was not heat, it was resonance. A harmonic instability triggered by microfractures near the secondary compression ring. Every time the engine reached high-altitude pressure simulation, the imbalance multiplied until shutdown became inevitable. Silence. Real silence. Because she was right about one thing no outsider should have known. There was a strange vibration pattern they had never solved. Marcus stepped forward. He asked how she knew. She looked at him for a long moment and said she had helped design the original theory 22 years ago before someone else put their name on it. No one laughed after that. Marcus ordered everyone to stop and let her speak. The senior staff protested immediately. Shareholders were waiting. Time was gone. They couldn't hand billion-dollar machinery to a stranger from the street. Marcus surprised even himself. He said they had trusted everyone else. Why not her? Evelyn stepped onto the platform beside the engine with slow, careful steps. Her fingers brushed the cold metal like someone touching the grave of an old friend. She asked for diagnostic reports from the last 6 failures. People hesitated. Marcus handed them to her personally. For the next 3 hours, the richest executives in aerospace stood watching a homeless woman covered in grease-stained clothes read reports and inspect turbine housing with more focus than anyone in the room. She asked for a flashlight, then a wrench, then silence. She worked like she belonged there, and for the first time in months, Marcus felt hope. That night, while the city slept, Marcus stayed behind in the hangar. He found Evelyn sitting alone near the maintenance bay eating crackers from a vending machine. He brought her coffee. She accepted it without ceremony. That was when he asked the real question. What happened? Why was someone who understood jet propulsion better than half his staff sleeping on sidewalks? Evelyn stared into the paper cup for a long time before answering. 25 years earlier, she had been one of the brightest propulsion engineers in the country. She worked for a defense contractor where she developed a resonance stabilization concept that could reduce turbine failure by nearly 40%. Her work was revolutionary, but she was a woman in rooms full of powerful men who preferred their own names on innovation. Her direct supervisor stole her research, presented it as his own, and was promoted. When she fought back, she was labeled unstable, difficult, emotional. Then came the lawsuits, then the blacklisting. No company would hire her. Her husband left during the collapse, taking their savings and their daughter with promises he never kept. Evelyn spent years trying to fight systems built to erase people like her. Eventually, the fight took everything: career, family, home, hope. Hope? Marcus listened without interrupting. He had spent his life surrounded by people chasing power. But sitting across from this forgotten woman, he realized he had never met someone who had paid so much for simply telling the truth. He asked why she came to Blackstone. She gave a sad smile. Because she saw the news. Because she recognized the failure pattern. Because watching another room full of men fail with her stolen work felt like the universe asking for one final joke. But mostly, she said, because she was tired of being invisible. That sentence stayed with Marcus all night. The next morning, he made a decision that shocked the board. He gave Evelyn temporary access to the engine program. The backlash was immediate. Investors threatened revolt. Senior engineers felt insulted. The board accused Marcus of desperation. Headlines mocked the billionaire trusting a homeless stranger with a dying company. But Marcus didn't care anymore. Because for the first time, someone wasn't selling him confidence. She was offering truth. For 2 weeks, Evelyn worked inside Hangar 7. She rejected expensive assumptions. She ignored politics. She dismantled ego piece by piece. She found that the engine's real flaw had been hidden beneath layers of overcomplicated redesigns. A tiny structural tolerance error, so small it had been dismissed early, created destructive resonance under extreme pressure. The fix was not glamorous. It was simple. Simple enough to be ignored by brilliant men chasing complicated answers. When the repair was installed, nobody celebrated. They were too afraid to hope. Test day arrived under gray sky. The prototype jet rolled slowly onto the runway while executives, engineers, reporters, and investors gathered behind reinforced glass. Marcus stood beside Evelyn in silence. She looked calm. He looked like a man waiting for judgment. The engines ignited. Low thunder filled the air. The aircraft accelerated, faster, faster, and then it lifted. Clean, smooth, perfect. No alarms, no shutdown, no failure. The jet climbed into the clouds like it had been waiting its whole life to be free. Inside the control room, people froze before the truth reached them. Then the room exploded. Cheers, tears, applause, people hugging each other, engineers crying openly, reporters shouting into cameras. Marcus didn't move. He simply turned toward Evelyn. She was crying quietly, not from victory, but from something deeper, recognition. After decades of being erased, the sky itself had spoken her name. 3 days later, Marcus called a press conference. The media expected celebration over the successful test flight. Instead, he told the world the real story. He publicly credited Evelyn Carter as the mind behind the breakthrough. He exposed the history of stolen research and the failures of an industry that discarded brilliance when it came in the wrong body, the wrong age, or the wrong social status. The story went viral across the world. People who had forgotten her name remembered. Former colleagues called with apologies. Universities invited her to speak. Young women in engineering wrote letters saying they saw themselves in her story. And Marcus did one more thing. He offered Evelyn a permanent role as Chief Innovation Advisor at Blackstone Aerospace, along with housing, security, and full ownership credit for every patent tied to her original work. She accepted only after one condition. She wanted a scholarship program created for overlooked women in engineering, especially those forced out by systems designed to protect powerful people. Marcus agreed without hesitation. The Evelyn Carter Foundation launched 6 months later. It funded education, legal support, and mentorship for women engineers across the country. The woman who once slept under bus station lights now stood on stages changing lives. But the moment Marcus remembered most wasn't the press conference. It wasn't the successful flight. What? It was weeks later, late at night, when he found Evelyn back in Hangar 7, standing quietly beside the engine. He asked what she was thinking. She said something he would never forget. She said sometimes people aren't broken. Sometimes they're just left in the wrong place long enough for the world to stop seeing them. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to look again. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us humanity still matters. And before we end, I have one special request. Comment below with the words, "Everyone deserves a second chance." Because they do. Marcus looked at the engine one last time that night and realized something extraordinary. He had spent billions trying to repair a machine. But in the end, the real miracle was not fixing an engine. It was restoring a human being the world had thrown away. And perhaps that was the greater invention of all, not technology, but dignity. Because sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one carrying the answer. Sometimes genius arrives wearing torn shoes, and sometimes the future of an empire walks in looking like someone the world forgot. But kindness remembers, and when it does, everything changes. Months passed, but the story of Evelyn Carter refused to fade. What had started as a shocking headline became something much bigger than a viral news story. Across the country, people began talking about forgotten talent, about dignity, about how easily society decides who matters and who doesn't. Universities invited Marcus Hale to speak. Not about business, but about humility. Reporters who once called him reckless now called him visionary. But Marcus knew the truth. He had not discovered genius. He had simply stopped ignoring it. For Evelyn, life changed in ways she still struggled to believe. Her new apartment overlooked the city skyline. But some nights she still woke up startled, expecting cold pavement instead of warm sheets. She kept old habits, saving every food wrapper, checking every lock twice, carrying that same worn canvas bag even though she no longer needed it. Pain does not disappear just because life improves. Some scars become part of your language. At Blackstone Aerospace, her presence changed everything. Engineers who once mocked her now sat in meetings, taking notes while she spoke. Younger staff followed her through the hangars like students following a legend. She taught without arrogance, corrected without cruelty, and worked with the quiet discipline of someone who knew how quickly everything could be lost. But one part of her life remained painfully unfinished: her daughter. Marcus noticed it the first time he saw Evelyn staring too long at a family walking through the airport terminal during a business trip. A little girl had run into her mother's arms, laughing, and Evelyn had gone completely silent. Later that evening, Marcus asked if she had ever tried to find her. Evelyn admitted she had. For years, letters returned unopened, old addresses empty, phone numbers disconnected. Her ex-husband had moved constantly, and over time the trail disappeared. Her daughter, Lily, would be nearly 30 now. Evelyn didn't even know if she remembered her kindly, or at all. The shame was the hardest part, not losing her. Believing maybe Lily had been taught she was never worth finding. Marcus listened and said something simple. "Then let's find her." Evelyn almost laughed. Billion-dollar jet engines felt easier than reopening that wound. But Marcus was stubborn. Quietly, without publicity, he hired investigators. Not for headlines, not for gratitude, because some debts are paid in silence. Weeks turned into months. No answer. Then one rainy Thursday afternoon, while Evelyn was reviewing scholarship applications at her office, Marcus walked in holding a thin folder. He said only 3 words: "We found her." Evelyn's hands trembled before she even opened it. Lily Carter, 31 years old, pediatric nurse. Living in Seattle, married, one son. Evelyn stared at the photo attached to the file. A woman with her same eyes, standing beside a small boy missing his front teeth, both smiling in the sunlight. Her grandson, a child she had never held. She cried so hard she couldn't breathe. Not because Lily was lost, but because she had lived, she had survived. For 2 days, Evelyn said nothing about contacting her. Fear wrapped itself around hope like barbed wire. What if Lily hated her? What if she refused to meet? What if reopening the past only caused fresh damage? Marcus didn't push. He simply left a plane ticket on her desk. "Seattle, open date, whenever you're ready." 3 weeks later, she used it. The flight was the quietest of her life. Clouds passed outside the window like years she could never get back. She rehearsed 1,000 versions of what to say and hated all of them. How do you explain absence? How do you apologize for a life collapsing? At a small cafe near Seattle General Hospital, Evelyn waited with shaking hands around untouched tea. When the door opened, she knew instantly. Lily looked older, stronger, but unmistakably hers. The same careful walk, the same guarded eyes. The same habit of pressing lips together when nervous. For a moment, neither moved. Then Lily sat down. No dramatic embrace, no cinematic forgiveness. Just silence heavy enough to hold decades. Lily spoke first. She said she almost didn't come. Her father had told her Evelyn abandoned them. That she chose career over family. That she was unstable, selfish, gone by choice. As a child, Lily believed him. As an adult, she began to question the story, especially when she watched him lie about other things. Then she saw the news. She saw Evelyn on television. And for the first time, she saw a woman who looked less like a villain and more like someone who had been broken. Evelyn cried as she told the truth, not to defend herself, but because lies had already stolen enough years. She explained the stolen research, the collapse, the blacklisting, the desperation, and the shame. She admitted every failure, every weakness, every moment she should have fought harder. She did not ask for forgiveness, only honesty. Lily listened for nearly 2 hours, sometimes angry, sometimes crying, sometimes just staring at the table. Then finally, she asked the question Evelyn feared most. Why didn't you keep trying? And there it was, the wound beneath all wounds. Evelyn answered with brutal truth. Because after enough doors close, you begin to believe maybe they should. No. Because poverty teaches you silence, because shame convinces you your absence is a gift to others, because every year that passed made it feel more impossible to return. Because I was afraid you were better off without me. Lily cried then, not softly, but like a child finally allowed to grieve. She said she had spent her whole life wondering why she wasn't enough to be stayed for, and Evelyn realized abandonment leaves scars on both sides. They sat there, two women separated by lies and years, trying to build a bridge out of truth. It was not perfect. It was not instant, but it was real. Full soap. When they left the cafe, Lily asked one final question. Did you ever stop loving me? Evelyn looked at her daughter and answered with the certainty of breath. Not for 1 second. Lily stepped forward then and hugged her. The kind of hug that hurts because healing does. And in that moment, 25 lost years did not disappear, but they no longer stood between them. The following Sunday, Evelyn met her grandson, Noah. He was 7 years old and suspicious of adults until bribed with dinosaur-shaped cookies. Within 20 minutes, he was showing her toy airplanes and asking if she really fixed giant jets. She told him yes. He nodded seriously and said that made sense because grandmas were supposed to fix things. She laughed harder than she had in years. Back in New York, life kept moving. The Evelyn Carter Foundation expanded faster than expected. Hundreds of women applied. Dozens received scholarships. Some came from elite schools. Others came from shelters, factory towns, and lives where brilliance had been treated like inconvenience. Every acceptance letter felt like revenge against the systems that once erased her. Marcus watched it all with quiet pride. One evening, standing on the balcony outside headquarters, he admitted something to Evelyn. He said he used to believe success meant building something no one could ignore. Now he thought success might simply mean helping people remember what should never have been forgotten. Evelyn smiled. She said maybe both were true. Below them, the city moved in endless noise and light. Planes crossed the night sky like silver promises. For the first time in a very long time, neither of them felt haunted by the future. Because the greatest repairs are rarely mechanical. They happen in silence, in forgiveness, in dignity returned, in daughters found, in people brave enough to look twice at someone the world has already dismissed. And somewhere above them, engines once destined for failure carried passengers safely through the dark, powered in part by the woman everyone once stepped over on the street, a homeless woman. An engineer, a mother, a miracle hidden in plain sight. And maybe that is the lesson we forget most often. People are not their worst season. They are not the address they sleep at. They are not the rumors told about them. Sometimes they are simply waiting for one door to stay open long enough for them to walk back into their own life. Evelyn Carter did, like I did. And because one man chose curiosity over judgment, an empire was saved, a family was restored, and a woman the world had buried finally rose, not as a victim, but as proof. Proof that second chances are not charity. They are justice, and sometimes they change everything.